Let's start with a quote. "The most dangerous of all Indian leaders." Now, that's not just some exaggeration. That is a direct quote from British Major General Hugh Rose. And why does that matter? Because he was the very man tasked with defeating her on the battlefield. It's a pretty stunning admission from a seasoned enemy commander, right? And it immediately sets the stakes for what we're going to dive into today.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are zeroing in on the complete story of Rani Laxmibai. We're going to uncover the fiercely intelligent, highly capable human being who is hiding right behind the larger-than-life legend. If you've ever wanted to really understand the reality behind one of history's absolute most iconic figures, well, you're in exactly the right place.
Okay, Section 1. The girl named Manikarnika. Let's look at her early life.
Before she became this legendary warrior queen, things in her life moved incredibly fast. She was born into a Marathi Brahmin family in Varanasi. Now, her exact birth year is actually a bit disputed. British records suggest she was born around 1827 or 1828, but some Indian sources put it as late as 1835. What we do know for a fact is that she married Gangadhar Rao, the king of Jhansi, at a very young age in 1842, and that's when she took the name Laxmibai. Tragically, fast forward to 1853, and she had already lost both her infant son and her husband. Think about that for a second. In just a few short years, she went from a young girl named Manikarnika to a grieving widow suddenly bearing the immense weight of an entire kingdom on her shoulders.
What's truly fascinating here is the context of her upbringing. She had this incredible tomboyish spirit, and her father actually allowed her to cultivate it. Growing up in the court of the exiled Peshwa at Bithur, she wasn't just taught to read and write, which, by the way, was rare enough for women in her position at the time. No, she actually received intense physical training. She practiced shooting, fencing, and horse riding right alongside the boys. It was a highly unusual childhood, but it uncannily perfectly prepared her for the military destiny she was about to face.
Moving on to Section 2, the doctrine of lapse. This is where the annexation of Jhansi comes into play. So this is the geopolitical catalyst that transformed her life forever. The doctrine of lapse was this highly specific bureaucratic policy cooked up by the British Governor-General, Lord Dalhousie. Here's the setup. Just one day before his death, the king of Jhansi had formally adopted a son, Damodar Rao, right in front of a British official to ensure his succession. But Dalhousie weaponized this doctrine of lapse to just completely ignore the adoption. They refused to recognize the young boy as legitimate heir and legally basically just stole the kingdom of Jhansi for the British East India Company. 60,000 rupees. That was the annual pension the British offered the Rani in 1854. And honestly, this just brilliantly illustrates the cold, purely administrative nature of the annexation. In exchange for this payout, they demanded that she step down from power, pack up, vacate the Jhansi fort, and retire quietly to a palace down in the city.
Which brings us to Section 3, the face of a queen.
But as you can probably guess, she was not someone who's just going to fade quietly into the background. To fight this annexation, she hired an Australian lawyer named John Lang to represent her case in London. Lang actually traveled to Jhansi to meet her. Now, during this meeting, there was a curtain separating them to respect local tradition. But in this crazy twist of fate, her adopted son suddenly pulled the curtain back. Because of that one split-second moment, Lang became the only Westerner to ever meet her face-to-face. And his book, Wanderings in India, actually provides history with its only objective eyewitness description of what she looked like.
Lang actually wrote down his impressions. He said, "The queen was a woman with a round face. Her eyes were very beautiful, and the texture of her nose was very delicate. The queen was dressed in white muslin." He also noted she wasn't wearing any jewelry except for earrings. It's this wonderfully serene, simple, delicate physical description, isn't it? It completely strips away all that mythology and contrasts so sharply with the brutal reality of the battlefield she was about to enter. It was actually during this very same meeting with Lang that she delivered her immortal, defiant response to the British demands. With sophisticated intelligence and just absolute determination, she flat out told him, "I will not give my Jhansi." That single sentence absolutely shocked her political enemies and set her on a path of no return. Section 4. The Siege of Jhansi.
When the Whydah Rebellion broke out in 1857, Jhansi was initially pretty peaceful. The Rani's stance was actually neutral at first. She even went as far as asking the British for permission to raise a small force just for her own protection. But as British authorities started to collapse, neighboring kingdoms like Orcha and Datia saw an opportunity and tried to invade and carve up Jhansi for themselves. She had absolutely no choice.
She officially assumed rulership, actively recruited troops, set up a foundry to literally cast cannons, and brilliantly repelled those invaders. She absolutely proved herself to be a highly capable military administrator.
But things escalated. By March 1858, British forces under Hugh Rose arrived at her gates. First, Rose demanded she surrender. When she obviously refused, he unleashed a heavy bombardment on March 24th. For 2 desperate weeks, the city fought back valiantly. You had civilians literally fighting right alongside soldiers under heavy fire. When the battle was ultimately lost, the Rani achieved this incredible feat of physical virtuosity. She tied her infant son to her back, bolted from the fort on horseback, completely evaded the British siege, and escaped into the night to join other rebel forces.
And that takes us to Section 5, the final stand.
By June 1858, she had actually helped capture the Gwalior fort. Then, on June 17th and 18th, British squadrons engaged her large Indian force at Kotaki Sarai. Now, notice the stark contrast here to John Lang's earlier description of her in that delicate white muslin. At this point, she is donning a Savar's uniform. That's a cavalry soldier's attire. Historical records recount her commanding presence right in the thick of the fight, wielding a sword with both hands and literally holding the reins of her horse in her teeth. I mean, it is just a breathtaking image of defiance.
But, as is often the case, the sheer chaos of war obscures the exact details of her final moments. We actually have 2 different accounts here. British accounts suggest she was struck down by a hussar saber during a fierce cavalry charge. However, Indian dispatches from the exact same time report a completely different scenario. They state that an artillery shell from a British battery blew off the arm of an Allied leader right next to her, and another shot bruised the Rani's breast, which ended up being her fatal wound.
Whatever the exact cause, what is universally agreed upon is what happened next. To prevent the British from capturing her body and parading it around as a trophy, her attendants acted with immense, frantic urgency. She was hastily cremated near a temple, hidden under some trees. By the time the British finally reached the spot, the ceremony had been interrupted, and they were left with nothing but unsifted ashes and bone fragments. Her followers had successfully protected her dignity, even in death.
Finally, Section 6, a lasting cultural legacy.
Her story vastly outlived the empire that defeated her. Decades later, the Indian National Army named an entire women's unit the Rani of Jhansi Regiment. And today, her name is everywhere. It graces a marine national park in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, major physical education universities, and medical colleges. She's deeply, permanently woven right into the institutional fabric of the modern nation of India.
But way beyond just institutions, she transformed into a truly universal symbol. Because her life was marked by these unknown facts, unaccomplished goals, and ultimately a martyr's death, her story seamlessly blended into peasant culture and Hindu mythology. She came to embody the ferocity of the goddess Durga, the auspiciousness of Lakshmi, and Shakti, the primal female embodiment of reality. She became a universal symbol of both the mother goddess and fierce national pride. Which leaves us with this final, profound question to consider. How does a 23-year-old rebel forge a mythological legacy that outlives the very empire that defeated her? Well, it's a testament to the raw power of her actual lived human history. A girl who learned to ride and fight, a widow who flat-out refused an insulting pension, and a brilliant tactician who commanded an army. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the incredible facts behind the legend on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.